Welcome back. Dr. Reese again with a brief video directing your attention to our recently published book, Our Shared Illusions, what neuroscience reveals about our future, our planet, and our mind. Available at Kindle, Amazon. We have discussed in previous brief videos engines installed in our brain through evolution, such as the attentional mechanism, the default mode network, which deprives us of attention, the riddle of consciousness, how attentional mechanisms are intimately linked to consciousness. Today, I want to talk about dopamine. And the title to the talk is somewhat provocative: Why Billionaires Can't Get No Satisfaction. So let's start with this, and then in the second part of the talk, I want to talk to you about the social defeat syndrome, which occurs when the dopamine-initiated striving are constantly frustrated. Imagine you are tasked by your government to create a robot which can explore the outer reaches of the solar system independently, being self-motivated, does not need any supervision from its earthly masters, and basically has similar cognitive structures and incentive structures that are built into our own brain. So what are the requirements that such a robot will need to have installed into its nervous system? Number one is motion. It needs to get around. The rovers on Mars are getting around, not directed by anything like the dopamine system, but mobility and exploration, of course, go together. Dopamine is intimately involved in motion. Just recall Parkinson's disease, when the person becomes frozen, stiff, and sometimes is unable to even initiate motion. So we need the dopamine system in the robot to initiate and maintain and control motion. But there is much more. It needs to be incentivized. It needs to be motivated to search out certain things that the programmer has found to be critical for the mission. So it needs a salience detector. Dopamine is also involved in detecting and focusing on what is important to you in your environment. Some of it has already been addressed in the predictive coding talk that we gave that also has to do with salience. Now, to make this thing go, we need a reward function. Reward in us humans is experienced as pleasure. Now, we don't claim that the robot will experience pleasure, but we can program a reward function into the robot's nervous system, such as is done in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence often is incentivized and modulated by a reward function that will let the AI know whether it has done the job correctly or not. So the seeking out of reward is an important driver, of course. However, here's the problem. If reward is the only goal, or if the reward can come in big chunks of installments, then the robot and us too will be getting stuck in certain tasks that we have found to be rewarding in the past. So the reward function needs to be attenuated. It needs to decrease. It needs to come on strong and then disappear and leave you with the wish to try again and seek out a new goal. So whether you have 1 million, 100 million, and $1 billion really makes no difference, because the past reward was fleeting, ephemeral, and is no longer present at the current moment. If you want to experience the reward/pleasure again, you need to aim for your next billion. That's why billionaires can't get no satisfaction. And that's very puzzling, right? Imagine you had $1 billion. Imagine you had 10 billion. What would you do? Turns out you would never be happy with it. Let's look at the other side. What happens if you strive hard, but the dopamine system constantly gets frustrated? You have a goal in mind, you proceed, and you never get to the goal. Let's focus on socioeconomic status. In this country, we have done a giant experiment with a large section of our population. Since the 1980s, wages have been stagnant, and people trying to improve their socioeconomic status have been consistently frustrated. If you look at the areas where opiate addiction and drug overdoses are prevalent, it's that area that has been economically left behind, and their dopamine system has not been cared for in an adequate way by our policies. There's an experiment scientists have conducted that results in what they call the social defeat syndrome. You take a mouse which is susceptible to the syndrome in a cage, and you introduce a second mouse who is a real bully. It tends to attack randomly, sneer at our poor experimental mouse, push it into the corner, and it's just a menacing presence that our experimental animal just can't get away from. If you repeat this over and over again, our poor experimental mouse will become demoralized. It lacks initiative, it will lose its hair, it becomes sick and depressed, and just a poor sight to behold. This is what we have done to large sections of our population by depriving them with a naturally expected reward of increased socioeconomic status for hard work and intensive application of your faculties. It's not surprising then that this population is at high risk for artificially stimulating the dopamine system with drugs such as opiates, cocaine, amphetamine, etc. So those are the two aspects of the dopamine system. We need proper care of our dopamine system, not just individually, but for large populations. We need to recognize that yet another billion on top of 100 billion will not make the entrepreneur any happier. We might as well tax it and use it to help those whose socioeconomic status has been stagnant and predisposes them to disease, drug addiction, and perhaps violence. There's much more in Chapter 5, so please consult our book, Our Shared Illusions, on Amazon Kindle. Thank you for your attention.